Welcome to that Bible Guy, my journey through childhood trauma. So today I'm doing a more personal video, a video that's a little bit different for me. I haven't really shared videos like this that often, but I felt the need to do a video like this to look at my own background for some specific reasons. I do hope that some of this helps and resonates with some people, just to hear some of the background. There are some reasons why I'm doing this today. My journey through childhood trauma. I think one of the first things that comes to mind for me is that many people just don't know much about me. In my local church fellowship, and maybe throughout some of the UK, I have some personal connections, but many people on this channel, my subscribers and people that I've engaged with online, just don't really know much about my background, very much at all. I think the second thing that probably one of the main things that came to mind for me was I know with my videos and I know with my style, watching myself back, and I know that the way I am in my own job and as a physio and as a minister now is I'm usually very clear-minded. I come across as quite clear. I like clarity. Usually simplicity helps with that, but I'm quite black and white about the way I see things. And I know that some people send me questions, and not everybody likes that. And not everybody can't understand why you're so clear or on something. And to be honest with you, it's treated with some skepticism. So, and I suppose what I'm doing is partly defending that style because believe me, it has not always been like that. I have not always been like this. I have grown through, and what you're going to hear now is significant trauma in my life. Now, I'm not here to compare. I'm not here to look for any sympathy or anything like that whatsoever. I'm really not here to do that. Just laying out my own story that God has worked immensely in my story. I just want to also lay out maybe very briefly that I do have views on how we respond to trauma. I won't have views. I'm not psychologically trained necessarily in how to deal with that, and I've got some views on it, but that's maybe all they are. But the biblical views often as well. I just want to also say that regardless of what our trauma is, well, actually, first to say, I don't want to make light of anyone's trauma. We are all where we are at the present time in our journey. And to be honest, you could meet me last year. This time last year, I had significant challenges at home. And some of them aren't quite so bad anymore and haven't been for a while. So it depends when you meet me. It depends when you meet anyone as to where you are in your journey. So I'm not here to make light of anyone's trauma or to just suggest that you just need to get over it or anything like that at all. Last thing I would say is ultimately what I believe then and now is that our trauma should lead us to greater faith. Whatever it is in your life you're going through, have gone through, or will go through, the hopeful outcome, the outcome that I think God wants to see, is greater faith. Now, that doesn't mean more money. It doesn't mean that you're sharper, better looking, more talented in some clear and specific way, a better speaker, a better online presence, a better YouTube channel. It doesn't mean any of these things. It just means that what I'm saying is it should result in, hopefully, in time, maybe not straight away, maybe not today, greater faith. There are many people out there who are talking about this subject, and I know other people I've engaged with online do fabulous stuff. I know that Carl Spears has a fabulous channel about dealing with trauma and some really good, helpful videos recently. So I'm all behind looking into, evaluating, and figuring out what our trauma is, but I'm also very clear on what is the outcome, where are we going to go with that, as someone who has experienced, for me anyway, what feels like significant trauma. Just to share them. Some of the things that I've went through my life. So I suppose there's four clear things to say here. The first thing I would say is I grew up in Northern Ireland. My mum and dad came from a mixed marriage, which in Northern Ireland in the 60s, 70s was a very, very almost unusual and dangerous thing. Catholic mother, Protestant father, from loyalist and fairly loyalist and Republican communities, which was quite a challenge for anyone who knows Northern Ireland. And they didn't always last. And my mum and dad's marriage didn't last. And I've got memories of my dad had left at a very young age. They'd separated. But basically, in my entire life, I have no recollection at all, hardly, of my dad. He left very young, been in Australia a long, long time, and I've never had a relationship with him. I've had one or two memories as a young man, young boy, young boy ultimately, very few memories. One memory of he called to the house where we lived. I hadn't seen him for months. I barely ever remember speaking to him ever. He called to the door with leaving over some coats that we'd left behind. And I didn't know what to say to him, and he just walked off, and that was that. And he maybe felt awkward as well. But I do have one vivid memory with that, where there was a spell when we went up to see him where they lived, him and his wife, new wife, had lived, and they had this new built house. And I remember going into this new built house, and I remember he supported Newcastle, the Newcastle plaque on the wall, Newcastle United, who are doing well at the moment. But I remember we'd got into the room and we hadn't spent any time with him, and there was no close relationship whatsoever. And I remember just sitting in the bedroom crying because I just thought it should be different than that. I thought I should be able to connect with my dad, but there was no connection whatsoever, and there never really has been. And that was his choice. But that was hard. It was, you didn't have someone to go to. You've never had a father figure in my life ever. And I suspect that's had a bigger repercussions than I realize sometimes, even though I consider myself in touch. So that was the first thing. The second thing I think that I had, and I think I have this by nature, maybe also environmental circumstances based, is I'm very sensitive. I was always very sensitive emotionally, how I felt, how other people felt, how we treat each other, how we act with each other. I was never a lad. I don't connect well with lads, mate, that are quite rough and tough and speak like that and so on. And I didn't. I suppose what it meant, I was a target for bullying. As a young man, I was a target for bullying, and that was difficult as well. I'm going to get to the troubles in a moment, but my mum was went with someone, a boyfriend for a while. I do have memories of him beating us. I can remember vividly him beating me and also my sister, and me trying to detract him to get him away from my sister to come to me. And I have memories of the scars from that that were still there as a young adult. I remember in school being bullied. I remember a few specific situations that still stick in my mind. That one day I was standing at a radiator in the school, and the only reason I was there was because I didn't want to be around other guys for the chance of being picked on or called names or pushed. And I just was petrified of this for some reason. I changed. We'll get to that in a moment. But I was at a radiator, and two girls came in. I just said hello, and a guy was with them, and I think he started showing off in front of these two girls and started sort of pushing me, toy fighting. I was like, not to look stupid, just sort of fighting back again. And he then punched me clear in the nose, mouth, chipped my tooth, nose exploded. I walked around the school with my nose open, bleeding. And I remember then going home. And one of the things I remember about that time is as traumatic as that was, and embarrassing as that was, and as fearful as I was, and the fact that I'd even just been at the radiator because I was generally scared anyway. I think this was third year in school, was the fact that I don't really remember anyone at any point. And this is not a slight on people, because I probably tried to hide it from my mom and so on, but no one really ever asked me about it, what happened, or can we go and no, I don't remember anyone. I think again that typifies that I became more and more closed about these incidents. I remember I got to my mom around this time, and I got her to write a letter for me to get out of several classes in school most weeks, because in that particular class I'd sit beside someone who would punch you or slam your elbow on the table or push you or call you names or just try to put you down. I dreaded the teacher leaving the classroom. Absolutely dreaded that happening in second, third year. I absolutely dreaded it. We'll come to what happened in the end, but the other thing was the troubles in Northern Ireland, the Catholic Protestant. I lived in a place where Catholics couldn't go to large parts of the town. Every single weekend there was a house petrol bombed or people beaten up, cousins put in hospital, houses of my friends were petrol bombed. My own house was under attack several times. Every time you walk somewhere, there was a different incident. I had a friend whose dad had been shot dead. I had other people who were beaten and, scarred for life. It was a regular occurrence. And even at that time, as a young man, just because of where I came from and because of my background in religion, I even was beaten up by the police, who actually sang, loyalist songs at me as a young man. And this really traumatized me. And by this stage, I was starting to get angry and reactive. I remember coming out of the police station that night after they'd arrested me for beating me up, when I was walking around, generally innocent at that point. I'm not saying I was always innocent, but I came out of the police station that night, and luckily I did have a decent driver who dropped me off and was quite pleasant. I think that softened me a little bit, but I had a plan at that point. And this is going to be the shocking part that I get to a little bit today. I'm not saying too much, but ultimately that day I got out and I was like, vengeance. That's my mind was only full of those days from about fourth year onwards with revenge. My goal in life was at that point. I remember this vividly. I was like, I'd rather be dead than be afraid. Anyone that makes me want to make me be afraid, I must remove them. It was as stupid and silly sounding as that. It's like I will take on anyone. I had a knife in my bag all the time. I would watch movies with violent parts and rewind the violent part. I used to watch The Craze, Goodfellas, Once Were Warriors. There's 3 or 4 clear movies that I used to watch, and I used to almost act out the violent part. It was very, very psychologically concerning at that point. But this is some of the stuff I done. I remember I wanted to get discussions with someone about where you could purchase a gun in order to deal with the policeman who had done this to me. I basically was, again, subject to sectarianism, violence, bullying, picked on by authority figures, adults, children, friends. I was like, I had it. I was ready to take on the world. And so this is one of the major things that went on for me. And I was like this for a few years. And I had several incidents where I knew that I acted very foolishly. But on top of all this, I had physical insecurities as well. Spots started. I always was quite, even now, quite vain about what you look like. Do people like you? Do they not? And just uptight about insecurity. So you try to prove yourself through sports or performance or how you looked or training in all these different ways. And this was me, a deep vessel, empty vessel, trying to prove himself by what he could do or how he looked like or something along those lines. This is where I was at. This is the trauma. And again, I've only given a snippet today, but let's just put it this way. I was severely traumatized. I was someone who needed to sit down with a professional and talk through what I was going through. I used to admire spree killers who went on a rampage killing lots and lots of people because they were so mad. And that's how I felt. I was, at that point in my life, I'm embarrassed to say, capable of anything in terms of things that came from anger. And I did several incidents that arrested, put out of school, and various things. I was on a path to destruction. But in all of this, I realized there is a God, and someone oversees my life, and there is someone we will all answer to. I can't cause pain to someone else because someone's caused pain to me, because then I'm causing on them what I didn't want to be caused on me, and that doesn't work. I can't have a high ground then to do what I'm doing, and this caused me some dilemmas. And there are many things that happened along the way, but let's just say anything I tried to do, whether it be women, relationships, strength, friends, fighting, whatever it was all summed up by a picture in my house that we removed off the door when my mum moved out of our long-term childhood home. So he took a poster off the door as we moved house from where we were in Larne up to Carnlough. And when she removed the poster, and I'd forgotten all about this, there was a huge hole in the door. And it was me. I'd punched the hole in the door. I'd forgotten I'd ever done it. What I was doing in my life was like that. I was papering over the cracks. I was putting things on the big, large cracks in my life in the hope that it would make me feel better, but it never did. It was a papering over the cracks. I had to acknowledge that I needed God's help, but also that I wanted God's help in life. And I was searching. Someone invited me to church on the street in Belfast. They gave me the card. I thought, you Christians are nerds. Didn't say this, of course. You guys are, I want to keep doing what I'm doing. I think I'm getting popular. I don't want to do this, but I do believe it. But I took the card, put it in my drawer. About a year later, I was living on my own at the time in a sort of student accommodation. I found the card inside the drawer. I started seeking. I started reading the Bible. I started asking around Christian bookshops to see where there was a church. Couldn't get one I wanted to go to. I opened the drawer and I found this card of the guy had given me a year before. Phoned it up, didn't know who it was, and we met up and we looked into what the Bible said. I came along with all my own books to study with him because I had lots of strong views on things. But I knew I needed God's help. I'd started praying then and thought, I need to find a solution to this. And there's a couple of, my favorite songs at the moment is a Hillsong, so worship song is I Am Who You Say I Am. And I realized as I started looking into the Bible, started praying, I am who God says I am. I have this view of myself. Even today, we can have this view of ourselves. But the reality is, we are, as Christians or wannabe Christians, we actually are. And even those who are not Christians, we are who God says we are. And believe me, that's all good. When you realize what God says about you, how he feels about you, how much he would go to great lengths to show you, it transforms your life. You become someone different. A couple of scriptures that at that time really stood out to me, helped me so much to be transformed and really take the steps, because I had a lot of stuff to give up. A lot of things I was putting my trust in that felt good. Many things we do as non-Christians or even as Christians that are sinful or not good feel good, right? So Acts 17 and in verse 26 says, from one man God made all the nations, that they should inhabit the whole earth. He marked out their appointed times in history and the boundaries of their lands. Why did he do this? God did this so that they would seek him and perhaps reach out for him and find him. And this is the bit that got me. Though he's not far from each one of us. The realization that regardless of where we're at in life, regardless of what path we're on, regardless of what someone's done to you, and the anger that you feel as a result of that, God is not far from you now, today. And he wants you to know that he's close to you. He wants you to be aware of that fact, and that you then reach out to him because you know that he's close. And I realized I couldn't ignore this. The other thing just to say, and this is in line with my channel in 1 Corinthians 15, about why I made the step that I did, because I totally transformed my life. 23 years ago this August, I completely transformed my life. And it was based on this thing, this point. It's true. That's all that matters for me ultimately. Is it actually true? Was Jesus who he said he was? Is this true? In 1 Corinthians 15 it says, if Christ has not been raised, your faith is futile, you're still in your sins. Then those who have fallen asleep in Christ are lost. If only for this life we have hope in Christ, we are of all people to be most pitied. If this stuff isn't true about Christianity, if Jesus didn't come in as a man sent by God, prophesied, beaten, abused, put on the cross, died for our sins, and then he rose again. If that didn't happen, it's nonsense. I decided if this isn't true or can't be proven as true, if I can't know that this is true, here's the important bit. If I can't know this is true, forget it. I'm going to go off and live the life I want to live. And unfortunately, what it would mean, I said this to someone recently as a result of my past. You heard what I'd said earlier there. I said, and this is very concerning as a minister to say this, but what I mean is if there is no God, I would be out in nightly vigilante groups to seek justice for the things that I need to seek justice on. Because if there's no God, there's no ultimate justice. There's no ultimate lawgiver who will hold people to account for their life, and me as well. So if that's not going to happen, then I'll need to take things into my own hands. And that was my mentality. And I need to watch you I say that too. But, I want to be driven by love, forgiving my enemies, being able to overlook offense because I cause offense to others. It's a bit of a longer video than usual, but it's a bit of a skim through my journey through childhood trauma. It's just to say that I did go through an awful lot of stuff. And I think it does make me raw at times. It does give you character. But it does mean you can relate to where people are coming through. And even though I sound very black and white and clear-minded at times, for me it's as a result of having so many things happen to me and having to try and make sense of them all to navigate myself in this lifetime. I honestly believe that God is close to each one of us. That he'll help us through whatever trauma we're going through in life, now, in the past, or in the future. And I don't know what lies ahead for me or you, but let's pray for each other. Please, look, let me know your thoughts on this. I would ask you just to share this out if you think that other people will benefit from this. Please subscribe to that Bible Guy if you haven't already. Let's get his word out there.